The glint of sun off polished chrome blinds me for a second. It's too bright, too new, too red. A vulgar, screaming red. And she's in the driver's seat, that woman, her laughter tinkling like cheap glass, bouncing off the pristine leather interior I can somehow just feel from here, across the street. My street. He's leaning in, his hand on the door, smiling that smile. The one he used to reserve for me, after a shared joke late at night, when the world was just us. My breath catches, a fist of ice squeezing my lungs. That car. It's the dream I'd whispered to him about, the one I'd been meticulously, painstakingly saving for. Every extra shift, every skipped lunch, every maybe next year, to a vacation. It's all there, parked on my curb, with her inside. The world tilts, the cheerful Saturday morning sounds of lawnmowers and distant children's laughter warping into a monstrous symphony of my own personal horror. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. The story I'm about to tell you, it's one of those where you think, this can't be real, but it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me share these moments more than you know. Our life, before the red car, was a carefully constructed tapestry of quiet comforts and shared ambitions. Mark and we were a team. Or so I believed. We'd met young, fumbled through our 20s together, and settled into a rhythm in our 30s that felt like a well-worn, comfortable sweater. Our little house, with its slightly overgrown garden, was our haven. Evenings were for simple dinners, comfortable silences punctuated by the low hum of the television, or debates about which box set to binge next. Weekends were for lazy coffees, trips to the hardware store for children or DIY project I'd optimistically started, and sometimes, just sometimes, dreaming aloud. My dream had wheels. A specific kind of car, not flashy but classic, elegant. A symbol, for me, of freedom, of having arrived at a place of quiet success achieved on my own terms, within the partnership of our marriage. I'd opened a separate savings account years ago, a little secret squirrel fund, I'd jokingly call it. Mark knew about it, of course. He'd even teased me. Still saving for that museum piece, babe? He'd ruffle my hair, a gesture that used to feel affectionate, now, in retrospect, feels patronizing. I'd diligently put aside a portion of my freelance graphic design income, every bonus, every unexpected windfall. It was my discipline, my quiet project. I imagined the day I'd drive it home, the surprise on his face, the shared pride, a testament to us. The account was under my name solely, a decision born not out of mistrust, but a desire for that specific achievement to be tangibly mine, a gift I was cultivating for our future, for joy. Mark handled most of our joint finances, the bills, the mortgage. He was, or so I thought, meticulous. Good with numbers, he'd say with a self-deprecating shrug that I found endearing. I trusted him. Implicitly. Completely. The kind of trust that feels like bedrock, unshakable. The kind of trust that makes you feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to share your softest, most tender dreams. What a fool I was. A trusting, naive fool. The world was painted in shades of contentment. My design business was thriving. Mark had recently received a promotion at his architectural firm. We talked about starting a family perhaps next year. Life felt good. Predictable, in the best possible way. I'd check my savings account occasionally, the numbers climbing steadily, a warm glow spreading through me with each deposit. Nearly there. Just a little longer. The anticipation was a quiet hum beneath the surface of my daily life. I'd even started browsing dealerships online, comparing specs, imagining the feel of the steering wheel in my hands. It was a harmless fantasy, soon to be reality. There were no warning signs. No late nights he couldn't explain, no clandestine phone calls, no lipstick on his collar. Or perhaps I was too immersed in my own bubble of contentment to see them. Perhaps the signs were there, subtle shifts in his attention, a new preoccupation with his phone, a slight coolness where there once was warmth, but I dismissed them as stress from his new role or my own overactive imagination. It's terrifying, isn't it? How a life can be bifurcated so cleanly into a before and after, with no visible seam until you're standing in the wreckage of the after, wondering how you missed the tremors that preceded the earthquake. The ground beneath my feet felt solid. The air I breathed felt clean. I was happy. And completely, utterly, devastatingly wrong. The discovery wasn't a red car on the curb, not initially. That was the horrifying Technicolor confirmation. The first tremor was a small, almost insignificant thing. A notification from my bank. An unusually large transaction. I was in my home office, coffee steaming beside me, reviewing a client proof. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting a client email or a social media update. Instead, it was a fraud alert. Suspicious activity detected on your savings account ending in 7754. A withdrawal of $58,75,000. Was this you? My blood ran cold. $58,750. The exact amount I'd meticulously saved. The exact amount needed for my car, down to the last option package I'd mentally selected. No, it couldn't be. A mistake. A glitch in the banking system. My fingers fumbled as I tried to unlock my banking app, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The screen swam before my eyes. There it was. A transfer. Not a withdrawal, a transfer. To an account I didn't recognize. Dated 2 days ago. 2 days. While I was blissfully unaware, sketching logos and choosing color palettes, my dream was being siphoned away. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. I called the bank, my voice trembling so hard I could barely form words. The customer service representative was calm, professional, running through security questions. "Can you confirm the last authorized transaction, ma'am?" I wanted to scream. I could barely breathe. After an eternity, she confirmed the transfer. It was legitimate, she said, authorized. But how? How could it be authorized? It was my account, my name, my password. Then, a sickening detail emerged from the fog of my panic. The transfer had been initiated online, followed by a phone call verification. A call where someone impersonating me had confirmed all my security details. My mother's maiden name. My first pet's name. My place of birth. Details Mark knew. Details only Mark, in my closest circle, would know with such precision, such confidence. The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles white. No. Not Mark. He wouldn't. He couldn't. We were a team. We built a life together. This was the act of an enemy, a thief, a stranger. Not the man I shared my bed with, my life with. My mind raced, desperately searching for any other explanation, any loophole, any possibility that didn't involve him. A sophisticated hack? Identity theft by a stranger? But the security questions so personal. I stumbled out of my office, a zombie in my own home. Mark was in the kitchen making coffee, humming along to the radio. He looked up, smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead. Want one?" That smile. The same smile I would see hours later, bestowed upon another woman, leaning into my car. But in that moment, seeing him so normal, so utterly oblivious to the storm raging inside me, a tiny, poisonous seed of doubt began to sprout. Could he be this deceitful? This cruel? "Mark," I began, my voice a dry croak. "Something's happened. With my savings account." He turned, coffee cup halfway to his lips, his expression one of mild concern. "Oh, what's up?" "The money, it's gone. All of it." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean, gone?" "Like, stolen." He put the cup down, his concern deepening, or so it seemed. "We need to call the bank, call the police. That's a lot of money, Sarah." His reaction was perfect, concerned, proactive. Exactly what an innocent husband's reaction should be. And yet, something felt off. A flicker in his eyes? A tension in his shoulders that wasn't there a moment ago? Or was I just projecting my own burgeoning horror onto him? "I've already spoken to the bank," I said, watching him closely. "They said it was an online transfer, verified by a phone call. Someone knew all my security answers, Mark." He stared at me, his face paling slightly.
What?
How is that possible? Who else would know those things? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of distress I'd seen 1,000 times. This is crazy. Was it genuine shock? Or was he a phenomenal actor? The foundation of my world was crumbling, and I didn't know which way was up. I felt a desperate need to believe him, to cling to the image of the man I loved. But the cold, hard facts from the bank, the specificity of the security questions, kept echoing in my mind. The next few hours were a blur of forced normalcy on his part and barely concealed turmoil on mine. He made calls ostensibly to security experts he knew, talked about filing a police report. He was solicitous, worried, patting my arm, telling me, "We'll figure this out, Sarah. Don't worry," but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. There was a frantic energy about him, a touch too much reassurance. I played along, numbly, my mind a chaotic whirl of suspicion and disbelief. Then he said he had to pop out for a bit. An urgent meeting, he claimed, something that had just come up at work. He'd be quick. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt like ash on my skin. I watched him leave, a strange premonition settling over me. The quiet in the house after he left was deafening. It was then, standing alone in our silent living room, that the image of the red car on my street, hours later, began to coalesce with the missing money. Not as a separate event, but as two horrifying pieces of the same devastating puzzle. The timing, the amount, his sudden urgent meeting, it was too coincidental. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house. I grabbed my keys, my purse, and walked out, needing air, needing distance, needing to escape the suffocating weight of my thoughts. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city streets a meaningless backdrop to the implosion of my life. And then, I found myself turning onto my own street, approaching my house from the opposite direction he usually took. And there it was, the red car, her laughter, his smile, the tableau of my ultimate betrayal, illuminated by the bright, uncaring Saturday sun. My world didn't just tilt then, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The initial shock was a physical blow. I remember gripping the steering wheel of my own sensible, aging sedan, my knuckles white, the sound of my own ragged breathing loud in my ears. The scene played out before me like a twisted movie, one where I was both the unwilling audience and the devastated protagonist. Her, radiant, almost glowing with smug satisfaction, touching the gleaming paintwork. Him, attentive, almost boyish in his eagerness to please her. It was a parody of the moment I had envisioned for myself, for us. The car wasn't just a car, it was a symbol. And he had taken my symbol, my dream, paid for with my sweat and my discipline, and handed it to another woman. My first instinct was to scream, to get out of my car, march over there, and unleash a torrent of rage and pain. But something held me back. A cold, clear thought cutting through the emotional chaos. Don't let them see you like this. Don't give them the satisfaction of your breakdown. Not yet. My hands were shaking, my vision blurring with unshed tears, but I forced myself to take a deep, shuddering breath. I needed to think. I needed a plan. This wasn't just about a stolen dream anymore. This was about theft. This was about a profound, calculated betrayal. I watched for a few more minutes, a grotesque fascination keeping me rooted to the spot. He opened the passenger door for her. She slid in, her hand brushing his arm. He leaned in, and though I couldn't hear what they were saying, the intimacy was palpable, a searing brand on my heart. Then he closed her door, walked around to the driver's side, and got in. The engine purred to life, a sound that should have been music to my ears, but now sounded like a death knell. They drove off, turning the corner, disappearing from view, leaving me alone with the gaping hole where my life used to be. The drive back to my empty house was on autopilot. My mind was a maelstrom. How long had this been going on? This affair, this elaborate deception. Was any part of our life real? Every shared memory, every whispered confidence, every tender moment now felt tainted, suspect. I felt like an archaeologist sifting through the ruins of a lost civilization, trying to piece together a history that was all lies. Back in the house, the silence was heavy, oppressive. His scent lingered in the air, a cruel reminder. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, a photograph of us smiling on a beach, a silly souvenir from a weekend trip, the books we'd read side by side. Each one was a fresh stab of pain. How could the man who had built this life with me, piece by piece, also be the one to so callously tear it all down? My anger began to solidify, morphing from wild, directionless grief into a colder, harder resolve. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had stolen from me. He had used my dreams, my hard work, as currency for his sordid affair. The injustice of it burned through me, cauterizing the raw edges of my pain, leaving behind a steely determination. He wasn't going to get away with this. Not if I could help it. My first concrete step was to call the bank again. This time I was calmer, more focused. I explained the situation again, carefully, omitting the emotional details, focusing on the unauthorized transaction and my strong suspicion of who was responsible, though I didn't name Mark directly to them yet. I emphasized that the security questions could only have been known by a very small circle. The bank representative, while sympathetic, reiterated that the transaction had been verified. They would open an investigation, but it could take weeks, even months, with no guarantee of recovery. "These situations are complex, ma'am," she said, her voice conveying a gentle, bureaucratic dismissal. Weeks? Months? I didn't have weeks or months. That car, my car, was out there being driven by her. The money was gone. I felt a surge of frustration, but I pushed it down. Bureaucracy wasn't going to save me. I needed something more. My mind raced. Evidence. I needed evidence. Hard proof that Mark had orchestrated this. The bank had records of the IP address used for the online transfer, the phone number that verified it. Could I get access to that? Probably not without a legal order. A lawyer. That's what I needed. Someone who could navigate this. But first, I needed to confront Mark. Not for an apology. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that any apology would be hollow, self-serving. I needed to see his face, hear his lies, and gauge his reaction when he realized I knew. Knew about the money. Knew about her. Knew about the car. He came home a few hours later, whistling. Whistling. As if it were just another ordinary Saturday. He walked into the living room where I was sitting, surrounded by the ghosts of our life, my face set like stone. "Hey," he said, his smile faltering slightly as he took in my expression. "Everything okay? You look intense." "Where were you, Mark?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I told you, that urgent meeting at work. Peterson called me in last minute. Bit of a crisis with the new development project." He sounded plausible. Annoyingly plausible. "Funny," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm I didn't try to hide. I didn't think architectural firms had crisis meetings on Saturday afternoons that required test driving new luxury cars. His face froze. The color drained from it, leaving him looking sallow, suddenly older. The whistling died on his lips. He knew. He knew that I knew. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with the weight of his betrayal. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" he stammered, but his eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. Guilt. It was written all over him. "I saw you, Mark," I said, my voice rising, the carefully constructed dam of my composure finally beginning to crack. "I saw you with her. In the red car. The car you bought with my money. My savings. Every penny I worked for, every dream I had." He sank onto the sofa opposite me, his bravado collapsing like a pricked balloon. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantelpiece, each tick a hammer blow against the ruins of our marriage. "Sarah, I can explain," he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "Explain?" I laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Explain what, Mark? Explain how you systematically lied to me, stole from me, and flaunted your affair in my face with a car bought with my money? There are no explanations for this. Only betrayals. He tried, of course. The usual pathetic excuses. He wasn't happy. He felt trapped. She understood him. It just happened. Each word was another insult, another layer of disrespect piled onto the already mountainous heap of his deceit. I listened, my heart turning to ice. The man I loved, or thought I loved, was gone. In his place was a stranger, a weak, selfish man capable of breathtaking cruelty. He admitted to taking the money. He'd borrowed it, he claimed, fully intending to pay it back. He'd seen how close I was to my goal, and he knew a guy who could get a good deal on that exact model. He'd planned to surprise me with it. But then he met her. And things got complicated. He'd wanted to make her happy. The story was so ludicrous, so self-serving, it was almost laughable. Almost. But the pain was too raw, too deep for laughter. Pay it back, I echoed, my voice flat. You emptied my account, Mark. You stole my dream and gave it to your mistress. There's no paying that back, not the money, not the trust, not the years I've wasted on you. He started to cry then. Pathetic, sniveling tears. Not for me, I realized. Not for the pain he'd caused. But for himself. For being caught. My disgust was a physical thing, rising in my throat like bile. Get out, I said, my voice cold and hard. Get out of my house. Sarah, please. Now, Mark. Take your things and go. I don't want to see your face again. He stumbled away, defeated, to pack a bag. I sat there, shaking, surrounded by the debris of my shattered life. The confrontation hadn't brought closure, only a deeper, more profound understanding of the extent of his betrayal. But it had also solidified my resolve. He thought he could break me, discard me, and walk away with my money and his new life. He was wrong. This was far from over. The fight was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, bank statements, and sleepless nights. The house felt cavernous, haunted by his absence and the lingering stench of his betrayal. Every corner held a memory, now twisted and ugly. I moved into the spare room, unable to sleep in the bed we had shared. Sleep itself was a luxury, my mind replaying his confession, her laughing face, the glint of that red car, over and over. My first call, after Mark slunk out of the house with a hastily packed suitcase, was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Eleanor Vance, a name I'd heard whispered with a mixture of awe and trepidation in certain circles. She specialized in messy divorces and financial fraud within relationships. She was expensive, sharp as a shard of glass, and exactly what I needed. Our first meeting was in her sterile, imposing office. She listened to my story, her face impassive, occasionally jotting down a note. I laid out everything: the separate savings account, the specific car, the unauthorized transfer, Mark's confession, the mistress. I even described the car, the color, the make, the model. When I finished, my voice raw, she looked at me, a flicker of something, sympathy, respect, in her cool gray eyes. He didn't just break your heart, Ms. Miller, she said, her voice crisp. He committed fraud and theft. We can go after him for that, civilly and potentially criminally, though the latter is a harder road when it's spousal. A tiny spark of hope ignited within me. What can we do about the car? I asked, the image of it still burning in my mind. And the money? Can I get it back? Eleanor leaned back in her chair. The money is complicated. If he's spent it, clawing it back can be difficult, especially if it's tied up in an asset like a car that's now in someone else's possession. But it's not impossible. The car itself, that's an interesting angle. She explained the legalities. Since the money was solely mine, from an account solely in my name, its use for a purchase by him, especially for a third party, was unequivocally fraudulent. The challenge was proving it quickly enough to intercept things. Car titles, transfers of ownership, payments clearing, these things take a little time, even if it feels instant to the buyer, she mused, tapping a pen against her desk. If the dealership hasn't been fully paid by his bank, or if the title hasn't officially transferred to her name yet, we might have a window. This was the first glimmer of a strategy beyond just emotional devastation. Eleanor was all business. She requested bank statements, any written communication with Mark about the savings, timelines, details about the mistress if I had them, anything that could build a picture of premeditated financial deceit. I spent the next few days gathering everything, a grim determination fueling me. Each document, each screenshot of my dwindling savings was a fresh wave of anger, but also a piece of ammunition. Mark, meanwhile, had gone to ground. He was staying with a friend. He texted me. A terse, self-pitying message about needing space, about how I was overreacting. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. He clearly had no idea what was coming. He probably thought I'd cry for a while, maybe demand some of the money back in a divorce settlement eventually, and then just fade away. He underestimated me. He underestimated the fury of a woman scorned, yes, but more importantly, a woman robbed. The stress was immense. I wasn't eating properly. My work suffered. Clients would call, and I'd struggle to focus, my mind constantly replaying the betrayal or strategizing with Eleanor. Friends rallied around, offering support, shoulders to cry on, and copious amounts of wine. Their kindness was a lifeline in the storm. Some were shocked. Mark? But he seemed so devoted. Others, the more cynical ones, just nodded grimly. Men. What did you expect? But all of them were outraged on my behalf. One evening, my friend Chloe, a fiercely loyal and practical accountant, sat with me, poring over my bank statements. Look at this, she said, pointing to the transfer details. The recipient account. It's not a dealership. It's a personal account. Then, presumably, he paid the dealership from that account. Or maybe he paid the dealership directly from a joint account after transferring your money into it first to muddy the waters. This was a crucial detail. If he'd moved it to another personal account first, it added another layer to the fraud, making it seem even more premeditated. Eleanor seized on this. This is good, Sarah. It shows intent to obfuscate. He wasn't just borrowing, he was laundering it in a domestic sense. The challenge now was speed. We needed to act before the car became irrevocably hers, before Mark could dissipate any remaining funds. Eleanor started drafting legal notices, preparing an emergency injunction to freeze Mark's assets, specifically targeting the funds used for the car, and attempting to halt the finalization of the car's sale or registration to the mistress. The days crawled by. Each morning I woke with a jolt of anxiety, wondering if today would be the day we got a break, or the day I found out it was too late. I'd see similar cars on the road, and my stomach would clench. The color red became a personal affront. I avoided the street where I'd seen them, but the image was seared into my brain. The mistress, I didn't even know her name. She was just her, a symbol of Mark's deceit. Did she know where the money came from? Did she care? Probably not. Mark tried calling a few times. I let it go to voicemail. His messages were a mixture of pleading and passive aggression. Sarah, we need to talk. You're not being fair. This silence is killing me. Can't we just sort this out like adults? Like adults. As if his theft and adultery were just minor disagreements to be smoothed over. I saved the voicemails. Eleanor said they might be useful. Every word he uttered seemed to dig his hole deeper. One afternoon, Eleanor called. We have a hearing date for the injunction. It's soon. Very soon. But I've also sent a strongly worded letter to the dealership Mark likely used, based on the location where you saw the car and the typical price point. We've informed them of a dispute over the funds used for the purchase of a vehicle matching that description around that date. We've warned them that proceeding with finalizing the sale or transfer of title might embroil them in legal action. A small, vicious thrill went through me. What will they do? Hopefully they'll pause, Eleanor said. No dealership wants that kind of trouble or bad PR. They might contact Mark or the new owner and put a hold on things pending clarification. It buys us time, and it puts pressure on him. The rising challenges were not just legal, they were deeply personal. Every step forward in the legal battle felt like wading through mud, emotionally exhausting. The world, which had once felt bright and full of promise, now seemed shaded in gray, the colors muted by betrayal. There was the constant, gnawing anxiety about the outcome. What if we failed? What if he and his mistress drove off into the sunset in my car, laughing at my expense? The thought was a spur, pushing me onward even when I felt like collapsing. The house, our home, became a battleground of memories. I started packing his things. Not out of spite, initially, but out of a desperate need to reclaim my space, to erase his presence. Each item, his worn leather armchair, his collection of pretentious jazz CDs, his running shoes by the door, was a reminder of the life we'd shared, a life built on a foundation of lies. Boxing them up felt like performing an exorcism. Sometimes, I'd find something that triggered a wave of grief so intense it buckled my knees, a photograph from our honeymoon, a silly note he'd left on the fridge years ago. The love hadn't been a lie for me, and that, in a way, made the betrayal even sharper. Then there were the whispers. Our town wasn't huge. News, especially juicy, scandalous news, traveled fast. I'd catch people looking at me in the grocery store, their expressions a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Had they heard? Did they know? I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if my private pain was public entertainment. Mark, it turned out, wasn't being as discreet as he probably thought. He'd been seen with her at local restaurants, at the golf club he'd recently joined, paid for with whose money, I now wondered. His arrogance was astounding. One afternoon, I ran into an acquaintance, Maria, at the coffee shop. She was one of those women who always knew everything about everyone. She approached me, her eyes gleaming with unsavory interest. "Sarah, darling," she cooed, "I heard about you and Mark. So terribly sorry. These things happen, you know." Her sympathy felt as genuine as a $3 bill. "And I saw him the other day with that woman, in a rather flashy new red car." Quite the statement piece. She paused, waiting for my reaction. I just smiled, a tight, brittle smile. Yes, it certainly is. Inside, I was seething. So, they were flaunting it. Good. Let them get comfortable. The mistress, I learned through the grapevine, and a bit of not-so-subtle social media stalking by Chloe, was named Tiffany. Tiffany. Of course she was. She was younger, with professionally highlighted hair, a penchant for tight dresses, and an Instagram feed filled with pouting selfies and inspirational quotes about living your best life. Often, these quotes were posted from locations that looked suspiciously like expensive restaurants or boutiques. My stomach churned. Was my hard-earned money funding this best life? Eleanor, my lawyer, was a rock. She was unfazed by Mark's attempts to paint himself as the victim in his responses to her legal letters. He claimed the money was a loan from our shared marital assets, conveniently forgetting it was from my sole, premarital, and personal savings account. He accused me of being vindictive and irrational. Eleanor shredded his arguments with cool, precise legalese. "He's panicking," she told me after one particularly blustering letter from Mark's newly hired and clearly outmatched lawyer. "He's trying to intimidate you into backing down." Don't. The deepest crisis point for me wasn't a legal setback, but an emotional one. One evening, exhausted and demoralized, I found an old photo album. It was from early in our relationship. We were young, carefree, full of hope, our smiles genuine. The Mark in those photos looked at the younger me with such open affection. Where had that man gone? Had he ever really existed? Or was I just projecting my own love and ideals onto him? The thought that our entire history might have been a carefully constructed illusion was devastating. All seemed lost, not just the money, not just the car, but my own judgment, my own past. I sat on the floor, album in my lap, and wept for the girl I had been, for the love I thought I had, for the future that had been stolen. It felt like I was drowning. The legal fees were mounting. Mark was fighting dirty, trying to drag things out, making counterclaims about assets I'd supposedly hidden, which was laughable, given I was the one who'd been transparently saving. He was trying to bleed me dry financially and emotionally. There were days I wanted to give up, to just walk away, let him have the damned car and the money, just to make the pain stop. But then I'd remember her laughing face, his smug smile, the sheer, unadulterated injustice of it, and a cold, hard knot of anger would tighten in my belly.
No.
I wouldn't give up. I'd worked too hard, dreamed too long. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about self-respect. This was about not letting him destroy me. The midpoint shift came during one of our strategy sessions with Eleanor. We were reviewing Mark's financial disclosures, which were grudgingly provided and suspiciously vague. Chloe, my accountant friend, was there too, her sharp eyes scanning the spreadsheets. "Wait a minute," Chloe said, tapping a line item on one of Mark's credit card statements. "Look at these charges. High-end restaurants, florist bills, ridiculously expensive handbag, all in the weeks before he borrowed your money. He was already funding this lifestyle with her. He must have been running out of his own cash to maintain it." Eleanor nodded slowly. "So, your savings weren't just an opportunistic grab for the car. They were a bailout for his affair expenses, and the car was the grand gesture to keep her sweet." This realization hit me hard. It wasn't an impulsive mistake, a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, ongoing deception. He'd been siphoning off joint funds or running up debt to impress Tiffany, and when that well ran dry, he'd turn to mine. The premeditation was chilling.
But it also clarified things.
It stripped away any lingering shreds of doubt or misplaced sentimentality I might have harbored about the good Mark. That Mark was a fiction. This new understanding changed my view, my strategy. It wasn't just about recovering my money anymore. It was about exposing him. It was about making sure he faced consequences for the full scope of his deceit. My grief began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. This anger wasn't wild and uncontrolled. It was focused, almost serene. It was the anger of someone who had been pushed too far and had found a core of steel within herself. I looked at Eleanor. "What's our strongest move now?" "The injunction hearing is our best shot at the car," she said. "We need to prove unequivocally that those funds were yours, were taken without authorization, and were directly used for that vehicle. We also need to demonstrate that there's a real risk he'll dissipate the asset, which his current behavior with Tiffany strongly suggests." "And the dealership?" I asked. "Have they responded to your letter?" "They've confirmed receipt," Eleanor said. "They stated they are reviewing the situation and the documentation of the sale. They're being cautious. That's good for us. It means the car's title and full payment might still be in a state of limbo." This was it.
The key.
If the sale wasn't fully finalized, if the dealership was now nervous about being embroiled in a fraud case, we had leverage. My perspective shifted from one of a victim trying to recover losses to an active agent in a meticulously planned counteroffensive. He thought he was smart, moving money around, buying flashy gifts. But he was also arrogant and sloppy, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that Chloe, Eleanor, and I were now eagerly following. The image of the red car, once a symbol of my pain and his betrayal, began to transform in my mind. It was no longer just his victory. It was becoming the very instrument of his potential downfall. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't despair. It felt like power. The deepening crisis manifested as Mark's increasingly desperate and, frankly, pathetic attempts to intimidate me or win me back, often in the same breath. He'd send long, rambling emails, alternating between accusations that I was trying to ruin him and pleas for forgiveness, promising he'd make it all up to me. He even had his mother call me, a woman I'd once been fond of, who now tearfully relayed how distraught Mark was, how this misunderstanding was tearing the family apart. A misunderstanding. Grand theft and adultery, repackaged as a simple boo-boo. I politely but firmly told her that this was between Mark and me, and that legal channels were now involved. The pressure was immense, coming from all sides, or so it felt. His lawyer, clearly flailing, started throwing legal mud. They tried to argue that my savings were, in fact, marital property, despite the account being solely in my name and funded by my independent income. They suggested I had gifted Mark the money, a ludicrous claim with zero evidence. Each new ridiculous assertion from their side meant more work for Eleanor, more legal fees for me, and another knot of stress in my stomach. It felt like he was determined to drag me down with him, to make this as painful and expensive as possible. All seemed lost, not in the sense of the case, but in the sense of my peace of mind, my financial stability, my ability to see an end to this nightmare. The world seemed to shrink to the confines of this legal battle. My design work, once a source of joy and pride, became a chore, something I had to force myself to do just to keep the income flowing to pay Eleanor. Sleep remained elusive. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through scenarios, arguments, and the ever-present image of that damned red car. Tiffany's smug face. Mark's deceitful smile. Sometimes, I'd get up and pace the silent house, feeling like a caged animal. The community whispers grew louder. I learned that Tiffany had been showing off the car with immense pride, telling anyone who would listen that her incredibly successful and generous boyfriend had bought it for her. She was, apparently, oblivious or indifferent to the storm brewing. Or perhaps Mark had spun her a tale, painting himself as the wealthy benefactor and me as the bitter, jealous ex. The thought made my blood boil. Then came the day of the injunction hearing. I was a wreck. Eleanor was calm, professional, radiating a quiet confidence that did little to soothe the frantic fluttering in my chest. We were in a sterile courtroom, waiting for the judge. Mark was there, across the room, with his lawyer. He looked terrible. Pale, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. He wouldn't meet my gaze. For a fleeting second, I almost felt a flicker of pity. Almost. Then I remembered the calculated cruelty, the theft, the lies, and the pity vanished, replaced by a cold resolve. Eleanor presented our case meticulously. The bank statements clearly showing the origin of the funds in my sole account. The timeline of the transfer. The evidence of Mark's affair and his sudden, lavish spending on Tiffany. She presented screenshots of Tiffany's social media, where she boasted about her new ride, complete with pictures of the car, its license plate visible in one shot, a plate not yet fully registered, still on temporary tags from the dealership. This was a small but crucial detail. Mark's lawyer blustered, reiterated the loan argument, claimed Mark had every intention of reimbursing the marital estate. The judge, a stern-faced woman with sharp eyes, listened patiently, occasionally asking pointed questions that made Mark's lawyer stumble. When Eleanor cross-examined Mark, who had been compelled to testify, it was brutal. She calmly, surgically, dismantled his story. "Mr. Miller, you claim this was a loan. Was there a loan agreement? Any written documentation?" "Well, no. It was an understanding between husband and wife. An understanding that involved emptying your wife's personal savings account without her knowledge or consent, and then using those funds to purchase a luxury vehicle for your mistress, Miss Tiffany Adams." Mark flushed a deep, ugly red. I intended to surprise Sarah. Surprise her? By giving the car to another woman? How, precisely, would that be a pleasant surprise for your wife, Mr. Miller? He had no answer. He just sat there, squirming, looking like a trapped rat. The turning point, the moment I knew we had a real chance, came when Eleanor presented the correspondence with the dealership. They had, upon receiving our legal notice, put an internal hold on finalizing the title transfer to Tiffany and, crucially, confirmed that while a significant deposit had been made, my money, obviously, the full payment from Mark's account to theirs was still in the process of clearing or had encountered an issue. There was a discrepancy, a delay. This was gold. It meant the car wasn't fully, irrevocably sold, in the cleanest legal sense. The dealership was now wary of completing a transaction funded by potentially stolen money. The judge listened intently to this. After both sides had presented, she called for a brief recess. The wait was agonizing. Mark sat slumped in his chair, looking utterly defeated. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, a grim satisfaction, a profound sadness for the utter waste of it all, and a thrumming anxiety about the judge's decision. When the judge returned, her expression was unreadable. She spoke, her voice even. Based on the evidence presented, specifically the clear provenance of the funds from Ms. Miller's sole and separate account, the lack of any credible evidence of a loan agreement or consent for this specific use of funds, and the current uncertain status of the vehicle's title and final payment. She paused, and the courtroom held its breath. This court grants the preliminary injunction. Mr. Miller is hereby restrained from accessing or dissipating the specific funds traced from Ms. Miller's account. Furthermore, a temporary restraining order is placed on the vehicle in question, VIN number. She read out the number Eleanor had found. The dealership is ordered to halt any further steps to finalize the sale or transfer title of this vehicle to Ms. Adams or any other party, pending further order of this court. And steps must be taken to ensure the vehicle is secured and returned from Ms. Adams' possession to the dealership immediately, as the funds used for its purchase are under dispute. A wave of dizziness washed over me. We'd done it. The transaction was frozen. The car, she would have to return the car. I looked at Eleanor, and she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a tiny smile playing on her lips. Then I looked at Mark. His face was ashen. He looked like he was going to be sick. The plot twist wasn't just that we won the injunction, it was the swift, brutal efficiency of what happened next. Eleanor, being Eleanor, had anticipated this outcome and had already been in communication with a recovery agent, contingent on the judge's ruling. The dealership, now armed with a court order and eager to wash their hands of the messy situation, contacted Tiffany almost immediately. They informed her, in no uncertain terms, that due to a legal dispute over the funds used for its purchase, the sale was on hold and the car needed to be returned to their lot. Immediately. Or they would involve the authorities to retrieve it. I wasn't there to see Tiffany's reaction. I can only imagine the shock, the indignation, the fury. This woman, who had been flaunting my dream car, built on my savings as a testament to her desirability and Mark's devotion, was now being told her prize was being snatched away. The delicious irony was not lost on me. But I was there for Mark's unraveling. It happened later that day. After the court hearing, he'd disappeared. I went home, emotionally drained but with a sense of grim vindication. The true climax, the moment of his complete blindsiding, came via a phone call. It was Mark, his voice a choked, frantic whisper. "Sarah, what have you done? What in God's name have you done?" "I believe the term is secure my assets, Mark," I replied, my voice cool and steady, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged within me for weeks. "They're taking the car back from Tiffany. She's hysterical. She's blaming me. They're saying the money, your money, they can't accept it. Sarah, you have to stop this. This is humiliating. Humiliating." He was worried about his humiliation. After everything he'd put me through, the sheer, unadulterated gall of the man was breathtaking. "Humiliating, Mark?" I said, a dangerous edge to my voice. "You want to talk about humiliating? Try discovering your husband has emptied your life savings to buy his mistress a car. Try seeing them together, laughing, on your own street. Try having your friends and neighbors whisper about your husband's affair while he's out flaunting it. That's humiliating." There was a pause, then a strangled sob. But I promised her. I told her, my career, my reputation, this will destroy me. She's threatening to tell everyone at my firm, my clients. And then through the phone, I heard it. A thud.
A gasp.
Silence. "Mark," I said, a flicker of alarm, quickly suppressed. "Mark, are you there?" More silence. Then, a muffled voice in the background. Tiffany's, I presumed, shrill and panicked. "Mark? Mark, get up. Oh my God, someone call an ambulance." He had collapsed. Literally. The stress of the court order, the dealership demanding the car back, Tiffany's meltdown, the impending implosion of his carefully constructed double life, it had all been too much. He had, as they say, been completely blindsided. He thought he was playing me, that he held all the cards. He never imagined I would fight back this hard, this effectively. He never imagined his victim would turn the tables so spectacularly. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. Not with fear, or even concern for Mark, if I'm being honest. It was a strange, hollow feeling. He had sown the wind, and now he was reaping the whirlwind. He had pointed the gun at me, metaphorically speaking, but in the end, it was his own grand, deceitful gesture, that red car, that had backfired and metaphorically shot himself. My victory felt cold, sharp, and deeply, profoundly satisfying, yet tinged with the inevitable sadness of what had been irrevocably broken. The red car, symbol of his betrayal, had become the instrument of his public and personal disgrace. And I hadn't just gotten my money back or started the process. I had won something far bigger, my power back. The aftermath was messy, as real life tends to be, but the trajectory was clear. Mark, it turned out, had suffered a severe panic attack, not a heart attack, though the paramedics were indeed called. His collapse was more symbolic of his shattered ego and ruined plans than any life-threatening condition. He recovered physically, but his world had crumbled. Tiffany, true to her apparent nature, did not stick around to nurse a man whose promises had evaporated along with her shiny red car. The dealership, eager to avoid further legal entanglement, cooperated fully in ensuring the funds related to my money were secured and, eventually, after more legal wrangling, returned to an escrow account pending the final divorce settlement. The car itself went back into their inventory, undoubtedly to be sold to someone with legitimately acquired funds. I never wanted to see that particular red car again. Our divorce was expedited by his utter lack of leverage. With the fraud so clearly established, he had little ground to stand on. Eleanor was magnificent, ensuring I received not only my full savings back, but a fair settlement from our actual marital assets, untainted by his attempts to hide or dissipate them. His reputation at his firm took a significant hit, not just because of the affair, which became public knowledge, but because the court's findings about his financial deceit cast serious doubts on his integrity, a fatal flaw for an architect entrusted with large projects and client money. He wasn't fired, but he was sidelined, his career trajectory permanently altered. A quiet, professional ruin. For me, the weeks and months that followed were about rebuilding. Not just my finances, but my life, my trust in myself. The anger, so long a driving force, slowly began to dissipate, leaving behind a kind of weary peace. There was sadness, of course. The death of a marriage, even one that ends in such spectacular betrayal, is still a death. There were moments I mourned the man I thought Mark was, the life I thought we had. But those moments became fewer, farther between. I didn't buy a car immediately. The thought of it was still tinged with the bitterness of the experience. Instead, I invested in myself. I threw myself into my work, taking on new, challenging projects. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the worst of a turmoil. I started therapy to unpack the trauma and rebuild my sense of self-worth, which had taken a battering despite the legal victory. I learned to trust my own judgment again, to see the red flags I'd missed, not with self-recrimination, but with a wiser, more discerning eye. The house, once a place of haunted memories, slowly began to feel like my home again. I repainted rooms, changed furniture, filled it with things that brought me joy. The ghost of Mark faded, replaced by my own growing strength and independence. One day, about a year later, I was walking past a different car dealership. And there in the window was a car. Not red. A deep, elegant blue. Classic, understated. It wasn't the exact car I'd dreamed of before, but it was beautiful. And suddenly, the desire was there again, clean and untainted by the past. It was a different dream now, a dream I would fund with money that was unequivocally mine, earned through my own resilience and hard work, a symbol not of a shared past, but of my own, independent future. I didn't buy it that day, but I smiled. A genuine, light-hearted smile. The kind I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The road ahead was mine to choose, mine to drive. He had tried to steal my dream, but in the end, he only managed to delay it, and in doing so, he inadvertently helped me find a stronger, more authentic version of myself. The victory wasn't just in getting the money back or seeing him face consequences. The real victory was in emerging from the wreckage, not unscathed, but whole, and finally, truly free. If this story hit close to home, perhaps a different kind of betrayal, a different kind of fight for what's yours, I'd love to hear your version. Surviving these things, it changes you. Thanks for being here with me through this. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life, and I appreciate every single one of you.